Cystic fibrosis can be a devastating diagnosis, but living with the disease can bring positivity and a new appreciation for each day. From the Bonnell Foundation in Detroit, Michigan, it's the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. Nothing on the Bonnell Foundation Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast should be considered medical advice. Medical advice can only come from your CF physician. Here's your host, Laura Bonnell.
Thanks for joining us for another Bonnell Foundation podcast. We are CF moms in 2 different countries trying to get the same thing for our daughters, medications that can change their lives. And with me is Beth Vanstone, who has an 18-year-old daughter, Maddie, who has cystic fibrosis. And Beth, why don't we start by you introducing yourself, telling us about Maddie and about how you started CF Get Loud.
Okay, so my daughter Maddie was diagnosed at 8 months with cystic fibrosis. She's 18 now and doing amazing thanks to the first gene modulator, Kalydeco, that was brought to Canada back in 2012. So she is doing amazing, and we had to fight like heck to get that drug covered for her because, as you know, the modulators are extremely expensive. And we obviously couldn't afford to pay $350,000 a year to keep her on it, but she desperately needed it. She was very, very sick. From that time on, we did win the battle. It lasted 2 years, and we ended up winning the fight with the provincial government to get funding for that drug for Madison and all other G551D. It's a gene type. It's very rare. So we got it for everybody, which was fabulous. However, following Kalydeco was Orkambi, and following Orkambi was Symdeko, and following Symdeko now is Trikafta, which I'm sure you know is like right now is the golden goose for the population, 90% of the CF population. So despite us getting the drug for Maddie, it just wasn't good enough. We kind of had a motto between us that no one be left behind, because it just didn't feel right that Maddie and a small population of CF patients would have access and the rest wouldn't. So we've been continuing to fight since that time. CF Get Loud was actually started by a patient who got compassionate care here back in, I believe, in January or December. She was very, very sick. She was a mom of a young boy. She saw that down in the US, a lot of patients were getting Trikafta and their lives were being turned around, and she was literally on a downward slide. So she fought tooth and nail to get compassionate, and she did. Another patient got compassionate care as well. So that's Steph and Matthew. Both CF patients gained access through the compassionate program. Jacob, our 4th leg of CF Get Loud, sadly, or it's like a double-edged sword, he's not sick enough to qualify for the compassionate program currently. So despite being quite sick, under the restrictions of the compassionate care program, he doesn't fit the criteria. So the 4 of us have been working night and day, literally, to try and get Loud for CF patients and get access to these life-saving modulators.
So here in the U.S., of course, we are cheering you on. And every time, I see a post on Facebook or something, or someone sends me an email, we're just here. We are one community trying to work together and make it good for everyone. And so talking about the modulator drugs and the challenges in America and Canada. So in October 2019, as I'm sure you know, Trikafta was fast-tracked for approval by the Food and Drug Administration. And the CF community, we knew that it was coming, but we were all shocked and surprised that it happened so quickly. And my daughter, Emily, she just couldn't believe it, and she said she wouldn't believe it until it was in her hands. So I was at a conference out of state, but called the insurance company as soon as I got home to make sure that she could start the Trikafta right away. And of course, all sorts of challenges come up. They said it wasn't on their formulary, and then you had to call the doctor to get prior authorization. You just get all caught up and tangled in all of this. Now, Molly, my other daughter, who's 25, is in school in the UK, so she wasn't able to start it because it wasn't even approved there.
Mm-hmm.
But the UK did just approve it, and the challenge just seems to be insurance companies right now. So many stories about people had a hard time getting the medication. And then as we bring it in and talk about Canada with you, Canada operates differently, and you're going to tell us about that. But why is it so difficult to get modulator drugs in Canada compared to the US and other countries like the UK? People say they think, it's cheaper in America. We'll go to Canada and we'll get drugs. They've got it all right there. So you're dealing with the Canadian Agency for Drugs and Technology and then the Pan-Canadian Pharmaceutical Alliance. So tell us how it really is there as far as it's related to drugs.
Let me tell you, it is not nearly as simple as it looks from the outside. And sadly, it's getting more and more levels of bureaucracy between patients and medications, life-saving medications. So at the time that Maddie and I were fighting for her drug, Kalydeco, it had taken quite a fight to get it into Canada. It was already in the US. So to get it submitted, to get the compassionate care program. I imagine you have the compassionate care program as well?
I am not 100% on that. I would have to find out.
Okay. So the compassionate care program is funded by Vertex, and people that are very, very sick are able to apply to Vertex through their doctors. And if they fit into the criteria set by Vertex, they're provided the drug free of charge. So it's an amazing, right now, I believe Canada has 130 different patients on compassionate care program via Vertex, which is amazing. They're saving lives, right? So that had happened. We have so many levels. So we have Canadian Access for Drug Technology, CADTH, which I think is similar to your ICER. They evaluate the drug as far as efficacy. And so we have the Canadian Drug Agency, where it's submitted and it comes in and it goes through that testing. Then it goes from there to CADTH, and it's retested again to see its value to patients and how effective it is. And it's given a recommendation from there. Then from there, it goes to the Pan-Canadian Pricing Alliance, which operates because in Canada, all of our drug programs are run provincially. So every province has different funding for different drugs. So rather than have each province negotiate on its own, they figured it would be more buying power if they all collaborated and they formed the Pan-Canadian Pricing Alliance to do negotiations. It's a pool. Like, you go in there and sometimes it feels like you're never going to come out. So getting the government to decide to negotiate is a fight in itself, just to get it in there. So we can get some approval and recommendation from CADTH, and then we're forever trying, okay, now you guys, you have this recommendation, go and make a deal. We need a deal. And it can be lost forever. So that was the part that Maddie and I were kind of had a difficult time with, because it had Kalydeco came through CADTH with flying colors. Like, Kalydeco was very effective and the scores were all great, but they still weren't going to negotiate. It sat in the pool of Never Neverland for quite some time until we kept pushing, and initially, and finally they did negotiate a deal and get it, because the provinces will not fund it until it's come through that process. So until it's given, so it can sit in there forever, and I don't think anybody really cares other than the patients that are dying waiting. So we have all those layers. And then last August, our government, the bureaucracy that surrounds it, decided to set us with another level, which is the PMPRB, which is the Patented Medicine Regulatory Program. And what that does is I just messed up. It's like alphabet soup. I got to tell you all these.
But aren't you amazed as moms what we know? We know so much. I mean, without the medical degree, we have so much, the insurance lingo, the medical lingo, the pharma lingo, the mom lingo, the everything lingo. It's a lot.
You don't have a choice. Like, when the diagnosis comes in, you're a caregiver.
Right.
Whether you knew it or not, you're a caregiver. So
right.
the last level of bureaucracy that started was the PMPRB. I can't even say the words right now, but what it did was it made the criteria so restrictive to submit new patented medicines into Canada that 85% of medications that have been submitted to the USA since August 2019, these new regulations, have not been submitted to Canada due to these regulatory changes. So we've only got 15%. Trikafta is one of those medications that is caught in this bureaucracy right now. It is not a fair environment for pharma to come in here and to make deals and to negotiate. They're trying to negotiate price prior to even coming to Canada. Like, who does that? You don't get a car from, Japan and have the price set prior to even coming into our country. So that's what they're trying to do. So the levels of bureaucracy just keep going up, and the fight gets harder and harder, and it's costing lives. As you know, like we're losing patients. We lose 50 to 60 patients to CF every year. And a lot of those could be saved right now should they be given access to Trikafta.
Absolutely. It's just really disgusting just from the parent angle of it. I mean, there isn't a nicer way to say it. And, as we're talking, we are warriors for our kids. We're mom warriors or dad warriors, parent warriors. And I don't know about you. Well, I know your answer. I've never dealt with anything as frustrating and unorganized as the insurance companies and the policies. And really, there are only a few of us. Not everyone has time to dig into it. You're just trying to, how do I go from A to B to get the medication for my kids? And so trying to transition even my daughters into handling their own care, because they're 23 and 25 years old, and they are, but they just laugh. They'll text me, like, hey, been on the phone with, this insurance company for, 2.5 hours. And how does anybody with a full-time job get anything done? So there's all sorts of working with that. And Molly's perspective from the UK has been very interesting. She said when so many other people lost their jobs, they didn't lose the health care because it wasn't connected to a job like it is here in the United States.
Right.
And that was a relief for her because, of course, in the pandemic, she lost her job, but she didn't lose her health insurance. So she got all the same care. She only pays $150 a year for medications. But here, my other daughter lost her job, but she's young enough, obviously. She's still on our health insurance. But, oh my gosh, it's so much. If you lose your job and then you lose your health insurance, or you have to pay an astronomical amount just to keep your health insurance. And there, Trikafta, I think it's pronounced Kaftrio. In the UK, it's the same thing, but it has a different name. So that was approved there, and she'll be able to start that soon. So that's very exciting.
But then you have one with and one without, right?
Correct. Well, Emily tried Trikafta here, but she had a reaction to it. She's going to give it another go soon.
Okay.
But in talking with that again, I know we're getting a little off track, but the insurance company, like our copay went up. I don't even know what the percentage is because I'm not mathematical, but it went from $100 to like $3,100. And we still haven't figured out why, but we have a couple, private and other insurances. So we're going to be fine. But if you don't, how do you go from a $100 copay to $3,100? It's just, again, as we said, talking about.
Now, is that a monthly?
Pardon me?
Is that a monthly copay?
Mm-hmm.
Monthly?
Yes. Yeah. Right. So,
wow.
But it's just making the insurance companies work and making everything work. And one thing that I wanted to talk to, because you're hearing it over here in America, but we're watching the U.S. and the international reference pricing, which we alluded to earlier, that our president signed the executive order and he's very proud of it and thinks that it's a solution to lower pricing of prescription drugs. But it is a discriminatory process, and it is the use of QALY, as we were talking about, the Quality Adjusted Life Year, and the National Council of Disabilities recommended that the administration rescind that proposal, but of course they have not. So what are your thoughts on the U.S. deciding that it's drug pricing after that of Canada or any other country?
I think that, I think they need to look to Canada and see what we're experiencing, see from the patient's perspective what's happening. Pricing is not everything. People need to have access to life-saving medications, and it's up to the government to work with pharma to come up with solutions, not just throw down the gauntlet and say, this is the way it's going to be, because when that happens, patients lose their lives. So every country is so very different. And, I look at the U.S. and I'm so familiar with our system as convoluted as it is, but I understand it. And I look to the U.S. and it's different. You have different challenges, and the UK and all around the world, there's different systems. I think the first thing has to be patience. I don't think that can be a piece that's thrown away. And that's what happened with our new regulations surrounding the PMPRB. They were only looking at pricing. They were only looking at the outcome. They did not look at the big picture. They did not look at the patients and how many patients would be lost. And I don't think that it's a solution anywhere. I think it has to be so much bigger, and I think it has to be implemented very slowly. I don't think it's something you can just go, boom, this is where you are. Right. I think the U.S. has so many of the pharma, like you develop a lot of the drugs there, right? So right. I think you would be in a much stronger position to do some negotiating, and make things better. I don't think throwing the gauntlet down is necessarily the best thing to do for the patients. And I think they should always come first, right?
Right. And I think, we have a lot of information. We have a lot of information about our kids, but I think there are brilliant people out there. And I do not put myself in that category, but there are brilliant people out there who can figure this out and take something from Canada and take something from the UK and come up with solutions here. And there is a better way. It's just so frustrating that maybe people aren't as open to saying, okay, let's try this. Because what we're doing here in the US is failing people. It's failing people with rare diseases. It's failing everyone. It's failing so many people. So it's so frustrating from where we sit, because we're on the ground, floor of this. We are in the trenches with our children. Yeah. And it is so frustrating. And, we have just visually met. This is the first time that we've met, but I connect with you 1,000,000%. So sometimes maybe it's because people aren't in our situation that they don't get it, but it's so frustrating because we really need to make this a world where healthcare will help everyone.
I agree. It just seems money is not everything. And I think rather than having pharma and governments be against each other, they need to be looking for solutions. I recently did a tweet, because we're on attack over here, to our health minister, and said, instead of looking at excuses why we're not getting Trikafta, start looking for ways and pathways to make it happen. Change your train of thought. Stop looking for ways out and blaming and pointing fingers. Let's come together. Like, pharma has a lot of money to be able to work too. There is two parties needing to come to the table, and we do not need our patients to be the casualties in a war that they're having against each other. It's just not. It's inhumane, and as parents, we know.
And I believe, you've talked about this before, and I have told this to people and gone before legislators saying this: don't throw all farmers in one lump. They're not bad. They're not horrible people, and they're not bad companies. Many of them are working with us. And as far as rare disease goes, they're working on drugs for a small amount of people. So it's very expensive in relation to the small group that it's helping. Under 50,000 with cystic fibrosis, it's 30,000 in the US and 70,000 in the country and how many in Canada.
Yeah.
Right?
We have 4,300 patients in Canada.
So
how can you not help them?
Right. And when they see the price of Trikafta, $311,000 per year, that to me is worth every penny. If that changes the underlying condition of cystic fibrosis for my child, why is their life not worth it?
Yeah.
And that's the quality adjusted life thing. That's that whole, that's a terrible way to measure something.
Absolutely. So when Maddie was a very unhealthy baby. So she was sick at 8 months. She was hospitalized for the first infection. She was hospitalized twice a year until, she still has the odd one because there was so much damage caused from previous infections. But her lung function was down in the 50s at 3 years old. She had brought it back up to 70%. She was less than the 1 percentile in her weight. Her quality of life as an 11-year-old, she was unable to play any sports. She would miss 96 days of school because she was sick. Play dates were few and far between because 90% of the time once I got her there, she was coming home because she was sick. She was living her life from the couch. How Kaleido turned her life around. How do you not value a child's life or a young adult's life when you can look at solutions to get these medications to patients? I just don't understand how it's even something that has to be fought with and not work together. We need to come together, and we're all fighting around the world for this.
Right. And when Emily started her drug, she was only on Trikafta for 9 days, but it was an incredible 9 days from honestly 30 minutes in to her starting it. She, her sinuses started to drain. And a couple days later, I didn't even say anything to her because we were very much trying to just let her experience and not say what we saw, just wait till she told us what she was feeling. Mm-hmm. But she would cough for an hour every morning.
Yeah.
And one morning I was like, oh my gosh, she is not coughing. I mean, it was a feeling of, I can die now. She's going to be okay.
Yes.
That was how I felt. Even though Molly still hadn't started it, Emily is the daughter who was always, always sicker than Molly. Mm-hmm. So with that, I was like, this was great. And then, as I said, she had to go off of it, but that was just priceless to us as parents. It was great. And so the other thing we were talking about is, so if, our president here in the US thinks it's great, they're going to lower the drug prices, it could directly impact new drugs and have them say, well, it's not worth it. It's not worth the cost, and directly impact our kids.
Yeah. And that's not okay. And that's what's happening in Canada as well. People are dying. And we had the same experience with Maddie. And I didn't even realize she had constant sinus infections as well. And I remember, I think the second night sitting with her, we were going to do her treatment. And she said, Mommy, I can breathe through my nose. My heart, it's things that you don't even think of, like you hearing no coughing. These are what most parents don't even think of that, right? To us, the silence of a cough is right? For my daughter to be able to inhale and breathe through her nose was just so that has to be factored in. Quality of life, mental health. That is so huge. And when these kids are given an expiry date at birth, right? Living with that expiry date, the weight of carrying that around, the weight on the whole family of carrying that around. I know, the siblings know, the husband know, the marriage knows. So much weight. But to have a drug that can alleviate the qualities that these drugs bring are so much more than just the patient. The patient is the main focus, but everything benefits. Working, parents being able to work. I stopped working when Maddie was diagnosed because she was in the hospital so often. I could not carry my job. So we made some sacrifices. I stayed home to care for her. I'm sure there's a lot of parents that could be back in the workforce as well as a CF patient back in the workforce, given these drugs, right?
Absolutely. And, you touched on so many good things, mental health. So all these years we were waiting and waiting for it. It's going to come. It's going to come. Like, it's going to come one day. It's, and I always thought, well, there won't be a cure in their lifetime, but it'll be the medications. And so we were always so hopeful. And then when it came, we were just like, oh my gosh, it came. And then when Emily couldn't continue on it, she's been in therapy every week on telehealth ever since. But I think now in the pandemic, maybe more people get it, how this impacts your mental health, how the isolation of CF, now you're isolating in a pandemic, how wearing masks, how being sick, how being afraid or worried about your life expectancy, or worried that if you're overweight or if you have high blood pressure, this COVID could kill you. And really, it puts you in a box maybe, or you have to be more cautious and really follow the rules. Hopefully this does get to, help people to understand. But I just do the same thing. Emily was hospitalized so much, I had to go part-time, and then I had to quit for a little bit and then go back part-time. And if you can't do that, what if you can't? What if you're a family who cannot do that and you have a child with a chronic illness? There's so many challenges that people don't even realize. But then you have to fight the insurance companies and to deal with everything just because we want the best for our kids. And I always bring this up, but when Nancy Reagan was very anti, the stem cell.
Yeah.
And getting that done. And then when, President Reagan had Alzheimer's, she was like, whatever it takes, do it. She did a 360 on it. So I get that some people don't get it until it impacts them. But so where do we go? What is our future fight here? I know in Michigan, my state of Michigan here in the U.S., we're fighting to get rid of QALY, and they should get rid of it in this entire country. But where do you see us going from here? How can we work together as Canadians and Americans to save our children?
Well, I think that just collaborating, discussing, sharing these battles, sharing information that we both have as we learn going forward. What we're learning right now and what is being very effective for us is educating our members of parliament. So most members of parliament get their information from government. So they're hearing one side. So when you go to your member of parliament and you say, these PMPRB regulations are impacting the lives of patients and they only hear the one side. So we need to then come in to them from the other side and educate them on the disease, educate them of the impact of these rules outside of what they are being fed from the government, because they essentially work for us. They're voted in. They are there to represent us. And we've recently had a couple of, it's the same. We have different, different parties, and the one party is supporting who's in government right now, and the other, because they want to fight that one. Now we have some that we're actually turning now that are actually open to listening to the full picture and looking at sorting this out and seeing who is doing what, how they can help, and not causing more jam up in the red tape that is surrounding the drugs and not getting to patients. I think just learning from each other and watching, and although our systems are very different, I find that the passion is very much the same. I think all over the world, parents fighting for their kids, there's nothing stronger than that. When there is a cure, well, it's not a cure, but the next best thing, we waited for that from birth, Right. How do you do everything we've done, raising money, having our kids submit to test after test after test to try and get their extra trips to the hospital to participate in research? How do we go all that and do that for the sake of getting to this point and then have that withheld from our child, right? We have to make them understand we were part of this process and you need to meet us part way.
Yeah, there is so much awareness to do. Our legislators in Michigan, our governor is very receptive, and we have constantly been in connection with them as well, but it's still ongoing work, constantly bringing to their attention, what they need to know about and things that we need to talk about. So it is a lot of work. And I think too, like my daughters have said, when you have cystic fibrosis, people really don't see it unless you have an oxygen tube or something like that. They always look fine. Like, they look great. Like, what's the problem? So we really do have to talk about it a lot. I know for a while there, it was like, oh yeah, everything is fine. It's great. Even though Emily missed 45 days of school and she missed her 7th grade trip and couldn't go to Washington, D.C., and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the trauma that they have had, in the hospital, just to, Emily's 23 and Molly's 25 and Maddie is 18, just at this point in their life, so much mental and physical trauma of making it through to this age.
Yeah, an age that they thought that they may not even see, right? As they get older and they start, and prior to having these modulators, as they started to learn more and more about their disease, they start becoming aware of the mortality. And from a very young age, I think as much as you try and protect them and to instill hope, that's still weighing on them, And then you have friends. Like I know Maddie is very connected, and I don't know your daughter. I assume
Maddie and Emily actually met on social media. I didn't know that until I was talking to her about all of this. That's
incredible. So they are so connected. This community is so small, but so powerful and so connected. The trauma comes when you lose so many CF patients. Maddie, and I'm sure your girls as well, have lost so many friends to this disease. And I can't imagine how that affects their psyche each time they lose another friend to a disease they're battling themselves.
Right. Well, and then there's challenges not only during a pandemic, but especially now, where roommates had to either move out or isolate because they couldn't be going back and forth in the height of the pandemic. And even as parents, if we want to see her, because Emily's in an apartment here in Michigan, if we want to see her, we can't be exposing ourselves to COVID. So, I mean, who wants to do that anyway? But, it's more serious for our kids. So, so there is that. And as far as the mortality goes, like we started telling the girls at a young age, just so it wasn't some shock when they were 14, just age appropriate. Yeah. And Emily was doing talks to, I think it was 1st grade, to a bunch of classes about cystic fibrosis, and she is a drama queen. And so she said, I have cystic fibrosis and I'm going to die. But it was like her way of saying, hey, it's okay. It's all cool. I'm
a little warrior.
Right. And then I also think of PTSD that you and I have, because we've been in the hospital and sat there day and night, and seen so much. It really is so hard every time they have an exacerbation or you're just waiting for a call.
You live on eggshells. Like every runny nose heightens your cackles as a mom. Like, okay, when do I call? When are we going in? When do I pack the bag? And I don't know, so we had a thing, we'd go down to the hospital. If we had a bag packed, we would come home. That generally would happen. You'd pack everything for an admission and they'd say, no, you can go home. You wouldn't pack and you'd be admitted. Like, it's just the way it goes. Right. So we had all these superstitions, but how often did you go down to a clinic appointment and be admitted from that room for a 2-week stay? And then as the mom, you got to rush home. We're an hour and a half from our hospital, rush home, pack everything for 2 weeks, rush back, worry that she's there by herself when they're young, Right. Yeah. It's a lot to carry. And now we have drugs that can, and I'm thinking for the young kids too, like Maddie has hers, she's doing really well. We hiked the Great Wall of China last September for 5 days. She did better than me. She was carrying the knapsack, right? That's what these drugs are doing. Now, you look at young kids now that could have access and live normal lives.
normal lives. They wouldn't even know what it felt like to have CF. But on that note too, like when we talk about normal lives, yes, but it also does bring up challenges. There are some side effects, and some people still have challenges, and they're still having exacerbations. So I don't want to paint it as everything is fine as soon as they take these drugs, because some people, with CF do remind me and say, hey, it's great, but it's not perfect.
That's right.
And there still is another 10% in the United States that doesn't have any kind of modulator that's helping them. So I know Translate Bio and Proteostasis, they are working on aerosol drugs, modulators that would, kind of do similar things as Trikafta. So there's a lot out there, but we need access to it and the money. And that's exactly getting back to what we're talking about. Exactly why we need this research and why we need drug companies to be able to afford to do this for any disease.
Absolutely. It's like, I don't understand it. You look at all these organizations around the world. We have the cancer ones, we have MS, we have everything. And we have patients and families like ourselves that have been working for years, raising money to get research done, to get to cures. Why are we going? If we are not going to have access to those drugs, why are we bothering? Like, why? I don't understand.
Right.
Like, I just feel like at the time, and I know you guys do so much, we have walked and baked cookies and bent over backward begging people for money year after year after year to get here. And if we're never going to get the drugs, it's kind of like, why are we doing this? It's like it's another level of like banging your head against the wall when you're trying to partner to get something done. It's not like we're sitting back waiting for everyone else to do it. We're in the trenches, and we're still in the trenches trying to get the drugs to the kids.
And really and truly, it is a race against their life. And that's how I had this parental anxiety forever.
Mm-hmm.
And then Trikafta came, and I was like, whew, I can breathe. But it really is like your kid is about to fall over the cliff, and we are holding their hand, like, just hang on. And really and truly, that is the anxiety that I feel every single day. And I know you do too. And it's, so where do we go from here? Because of course I can talk to you for 7 hours, like, easily. So CF Get Loud, love that name. I love it. It empowers everything that we are, because really I want to scream at the top of my lungs sometimes and say, hear us, help us. We're here. If people want to help you in Canada, what can they do? Where can they contact you?
If you can follow, we have a website, so CF Get Loud. If you go to our Facebook page, CF Loud Canada, there's all the links are on there. Following and sharing information that we have, and we often send out. We had a campaign called Letter for Lives, which was a response to a consultation with the PMPRB that I was talking about. And we had, I believe, 12,000 letters sent in on behalf of CF Get Loud. So just being part of that and supporting us by sharing things and standing with us while we fight, as we want to stand with you, like however we can help and support. We're all in this together. We have separate challenges for sure, but we need to be heard. US, Canada, globally. There are patients like, and I'm sure I hear from patients from all over the world that DM me and say, like, what can we do? My daughter, and you and I know what that feels like. Right. And it's like, all of a sudden you're like an advocate. I didn't sign up to be an advocate.
Right.
CF made me a caregiver, an advocate, but you do what you have to do. And I think because we're in this together and we're such a connected group, that I feel I want to look after everybody, as do you, because everyone deserves the same thing. All these patients deserve it.
Well, Seamus from Ireland, honestly, that's his name, Seamus, of course, because he's from Ireland, but he had a young child and they didn't know they were carriers of CF. And then he reached out to me just as he was Googling everything, because he wants to get his son on Kaleido, but it's not approved for, children under 12 like it is here. So he's thinking of moving to the United States. I mean, it's just crazy. But we get calls from people all over the country with the same sort of things. Or like we had someone in Hawaii who couldn't get access to a CF clinic because it was a veterans hospital. So just so many different challenges. So I think we're definitely all in this together. We're moving forward so much stronger together, you and I, and Canada and America. And we just have to try and help everyone else see what we're doing. So thank you so much, Beth, for talking about this. And this is just the tip of the information iceberg, so to speak, because I encourage everyone to read up about ICER and find out more information about them, because they don't benefit anyone. No. Not at all.
No.
And read up about that and kind of get as engaged in information as you can, or check either one of our websites, because we both have information on this as well. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been great talking to a fellow CF mom warrior that's fighting every step of the way. Thank you.
It is great. Thank you.
This has been the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode. For more information and to learn more about the Bonnell Foundation, check us out online at thebonnellfoundation.org. That's the BONNELL Foundation.org. Or follow us on social at the Bonnell Foundation.